So how do we cope with that? Well, in our office, we've created a parent tool called the Goal Matrix. And what this is intended to be is a document that will help keep you in the discussion when you go to your IPP meetings or go to your IEP meetings. A Goal Matrix basically says that you would have a document that tracks goals that are drafted in each area of identified need. I think that those identified needs need to flow directly from the transition assessments, which means that if you are unsure of your child's unique needs, you need to request an assessment. And the same thing goes for school districts or regional centers. If you don't know what the needs are, you need to have them assessed. I would include all assessments, not just the ones that the regional center has in their file, but maybe the ones that you've acquired privately, maybe from their job coach or their mentor here at Exceptional Minds. Those should be included. Why would you draft a goal matrix? Well, I think it gives you a means to track, and also it provides a framework for your dissent. It helps you to understand what areas I've agreed, what areas I've disagreed, and how do I move forward from there. And I would say that you need to have one of these probably in hand prior to that age 16 transition, and also before any IPP. Why don't we go to the next slide and we'll look at what it looks like. Okay, so imagine you have an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and in there you've created the following grid. What is the area of need that the young person has? Maybe in the area of organization or self-advocacy, or getting to school or work on time. Maybe arranging one's books or materials in order to come to class successfully. What are the present levels? This is an opportunity for you to go through your assessments in advance and have a good sense for what the present levels are, so that when your service coordinator says, what are the important attributes that you think that the child has now, you would have a nice list. And of course, this is an abbreviated format, but imagine if you have those assessments in hand, you might be able to reference assessment X, page 8, second paragraph. And this is a way for you to keep track of all of the information that's currently known about your child. The support, this would be, what part of, again, the document it comes from. District or regional center goal. And this would be here where you would say, as you're going through the meeting, if the regional center adopts a benchmark or an outcome 3 to address this area of need, you could write it in. And next to it, you could say what specifically works for that outcome or what specifically doesn't work for that outcome. And you can keep track of it there on the right side. This option would then allow you, at the end of the day, to have a visual representation of all of the areas that were covered in the child's program and all the areas that remain uncovered or unadjusted. That then can serve as your guide to compose the letter. Thank you for recently meeting with me during my child's IPP. I'm grateful for your efforts. However, I'm concerned about the following 3 domains. These are areas that I specifically raised as concerns, but have not made their way into the IPP document. How can we work on remedying this? Next, I believe this. These programs are necessary. You now have a demand letter that walks the judge through, let's say, your thought process, the dynamic of your participation, your young person's preferences and concerns that they have themselves shared. And this gives us a way to stay in the game. Keep in mind, school districts, maybe a little less so than what I've experienced with regional centers, they often move on this notion of exhaustion. And I don't mean this in a negative way. There are a lot of really caring, loving people out there that take care of it and help our community. But any time that you find yourself exhausted and unable to keep going through the process, your chances are your concerns that you were raising will often get by the wayside, right? They'll be lost. And I think that as parents, if we're continuing to serve in this advocacy role, we need to make sure that we have a system or a method to record where it is that the process left off last. Because I know if your families are anything like what goes on in my family, there are periods where we're pretty tired, or there are periods where we get bursts of energy, we can go back to the advocacy, that kind of thing. With me, it's a little different. My wife's on me all the time because it's my job. I have to get it done. But I think in the reality of the parent community, we have times when we're invigorated and times when we're tired. So anytime you can pull something together that will help memorialize your concerns and help you in your letter writing, I think you're ahead of the game. Federal law on transition, and I want to make sure that we're keeping it top of mind. Transition planning is to be within a results-oriented process that is focused on improving the academic and functional achievement of the child with a disability to facilitate the child's movement from school to post-school activities. This, I believe, is one of the strongest statements in the federal law, the IDEA, with respect to outcome-oriented. Keep in mind, the standard of FAPE is educational benefit, and currently the Supreme Court, taking up the case of Endra F., I don't know if you've heard of it, but the Supreme Court is finally taking up a case on FAPE again. And the 10th Circuit has concluded that FAPE means something more than trivial help, trivial advancement. And for the longest time, I think other circuits have held on to the notion that an appropriate education is something that's meaningful and gauged in relation to the potential of the child at issue. That's some specific language from cases in the 9th Circuit. The Supreme Court, with a 4-4, is going to be taking up the question of what FAPE is. And if we are stuck with a standard that says something greater than trivial, then we need to be seizing on components of transition planning which say that this is to be within a results-oriented process. Results-oriented is something you define, right? Which is, if my goal is my child will be doing X, Y, and Z, and if you formulate that in the age 16 IEP and you track it on an ongoing basis, it gives you the tool and the mechanism to make sure that the program has strength and that it's a program that results in your goal.
This is federal law or this is California?
Federal law.
So if you have these things from another state, California should be.
Yeah, the IDEA is a federal statute, and every state has to follow it. The exception in New York State is that actually you have even more favorable law. The New York legislature decided that school districts always bear the burden of proof. California, we've adopted the standard that the party initiating the case bears the burden of proof. So New York's actually ahead of the game. I only tell you that because you told me you were from there.
We're from here now.
From here now. Well, we have the Leonard Act, so we're talking about maximization of future potential, which is a standard I just love and dance to all day long. Because what it says is that it's not enough just to have trivial advancement or some basic floor of opportunity. We're talking about maximization of future potential. What does that mean? It's a strong standard. It says that we need a program in place that's going to result in what we're trying to achieve. It's not enough to say, well, you got a little bit of help, that's all you need. Because the Lanham Act just doesn't say that. You'll hear often, we'd love to do that, but we can't afford it. There's case law on that point too. The regional centers are bound by case law that suggests that they have to fund a program until such a day as they're out of money. So as long as funds exist in their funds, they have to fund the program for purposes of maximization of future potential. And school districts don't have a similar standard. So if you're working within the regional center, you need to be holding them to account. And again, the reason we're doing that is so we can get our kids gainfully employed and paying the very taxes that support those organizations. Next one, sir. Okay, if you're going through this process and you've got a student, and the question is, what about independent living? Be careful of any determination that, well, we'll think that it's best that the child just live at home. A lot of parents, of course, are of the opinion that they would like their child to live with them at home as long as possible to make sure that they have a great experience. Even if that's the family plan, I would suggest that at all times you ought to be equipping your child to live independently, even if they ultimately aren't. And that is, I've seen too many families come to the office. Maybe one of the spouses or one of the parents pass away, and the remaining parent is trying desperately to put something together for their young person who's no longer young to live on their own. And it's a tragic scenario. They don't yet have the necessary skills developed to live on their own. And the support systems that used to be in place are withering away. And as a result, the older aged individual is now facing a really dramatic shift in life. What I would suggest is that at all times we should be preparing for transition out of the home, and even if it's not something we're quite ready to encounter yet, we should have the skill set to do so. I think we should avoid things like exploring opportunity. I don't even know what that really truly means, exploring one's opportunities. It could be as simple as asking a few questions to, again, perusing the web for information. We need to be in a place where we are asking for and receiving definitive, step-by-step goals that lead us to our outcome, not just simply hoping that the outcome comes to us. For transition in high school, I want you to be particularly careful of predetermined programs. Transition studies, like every other part of the IEP, should focus on the individual needs of the student. Remember, you're dealing with an IEP, which the first word is individualized. So if your school district has a program where the children and young adults are going through transition planning, for instance, with the campus-wide recycling program, or work in the cafeteria, those can be very meaningful, but not every child with an IEP wants to do those tasks in life down the road. That may not be their dream. So we want to make sure that we're exploring programs and supports that actually are tailored to their outcomes, and that we measure those on a frequent basis. Be careful about goals that aren't capable of measure. I say this about any IEP goal. Anytime the goal requires a subjective determination, such as the child's a really hard worker, or she's a really great girl, or those kinds of things, those are things that I think a lot of us as parents, we already know, but we don't necessarily need that in the form of a report from our teacher with respect to progress. Of course, there's always the question of what do we do if we're not meeting our goals. I always say the best way to take on this discussion is to start with perhaps the goals might be too high. Perhaps we're just not there yet, and we have to honor our child or young person in the process. They may not be ready to achieve those outcomes. But I think the next question you should be asking, if you've concluded that goals or outcomes are too high, is what would be the necessary threshold skills that your child or young person would need in order to eventually reach that goal. And I think that works the same for IEPs and IPP programming. If we didn't get there, what do we need in order to get there next time so that we're not just stuck in the doldrums on goal progress? Be cautious of goals that aren't appropriate for the young person's current levels. And I see this all the time. Generic or canned components of the IPP, they're virtually in every IPP for every child that comes to the regional center. And again, I would want to make sure that those services and supports are in place, if they're relevant for your young person, but we want to avoid just having just generic components of the IPP thrown in just for good measure. Everything should lead to an outcome, and everything should be supported by specific commitment of services from the agency that's providing the programming. Of course, we see this frequently, that the recipient of the program isn't making a goal because the program supports have been inadequate. There's been a significant amount of turnover or loss of trained personnel. We see this a lot in the related services in school districts. Maybe the related services professionals are out on leave or frequently ill. And we see it in a tremendous level in the support in home or in vocational with job coaches and that kind of thing. There's a big turnover in these jobs because of the pay that essentially they command. They often are entry-level careers where we lose some of the best people onto the next things. And then of course be careful of the measurability of a goal being just simply too subjective or not measured within the scope of the program itself. All right, so that is the Sparrow class. That was our second cohort of students, and I think I can say this without breaking any confidences. The woman on the far left was a Sparrow graduate in the first cohort who came back as a peer mentor coach in the second one. They were harvesting Zinfandel on this day, and so you can see they have the fruits of their labor, at least on the upper level. If you have questions or concerns, you can call me anytime. We'll try to get back to you as quickly as possible.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
My daughter's a senior, and I have to get into this IEP Thursday.
Timing is right for you.
I invited the Department of Rehabilitation
Great.
supervisor, and he's coming.
Excellent.
And I invited her IEP service coordinator, and they're coming. And I heard some language when I was making the appointment with the service coordinator, and it was that, because I'm very clear what I want for my daughter and what she wants for herself. We're very
Fantastic.
clear. They said the words that a lot of I don't know where money, all that stuff falls into it, but apparently they feel that the district will be responsible financially for any transition costs that she would have. And just so you know, her transition plan is UCLA Pathways.
Great.
That's a great.
Had some fantastic results there.
Yeah, it's such a good placement for her. And so they're all like really, no, they've never had a child to want to transition and live on their own on campus with roommates and learn to cook and money management and have academics in her field. Her desire, which is why I'm here, is digital animation, special effects, post-production, all that fun stuff.
Nice.
So the plan is to go that, it's a 2-year program. The first year would be the academics of all of this, so that she's prepared for here. And then the second year, because it's only 2 years, would be an internship, literally doing this. And then I would want to come from there to the 3-year full time student package here. And then she would have 5 years, 4 years in an internship in this and really be skilled and employable.
So just for those perhaps listening at a distance, the question was, and I'll try to reframe it. The child that we're talking about is a senior. I presume graduating with a diploma?
No.
Not yet. Okay.
She's going to graduate with a certificate of completion.
Okay.
So she'll be eligible for the
services until she returns,
Correct.
receives 22.
Correct.
Okay. So the question is, that we've got an upcoming transition IEP.
They're all,
Gearing up.
disputing who's responsible for her at this point, because of course, the school district will want her to go to the vocational, the recycling, know what to do, all that kind of stuff. And regional center will say it's their thing, and then the Department of Rehabilitation, their thing is it has to be really about employment.
So, okay, so it's an interesting fact pattern. There's a trailer bill that was passed, I want to think about 2-3 years ago, and it stands for the proposition that the regional center cannot fund services for individuals during the 18 to 22 span, as long as the student is still eligible to receive those services through the school district.
That's exactly what he was saying.
So they're right about that. However, remember what we talked about payer of last resort, right? So if you go to the IEP process and the IEP team determines that they're not going to provide the UCLA Pathways as the program, then you would then frame it up as perhaps you would begin working with the school district to get them to perhaps consider Pathways as a placement. And by the way, it's possible. We've secured that for kids in our caseload before. But in the meantime, it doesn't mean that you are now obligated to be the bearer of the expenses while your daughter pursues her programming at Pathways. That's what the payer of last resort elements were meant to cover, which is while you work with your school district to get coverage, the regional center should be stepping forward to help in the gap under payer of last resort. The Department of Rehab, I think you have to take a step back with them and make sure that you're framing the Pathways participation as necessary towards her long-term vocational goals. And that probably isn't going to be hard for you to do. That program does a great job with pre-voc preparation. So what I would recommend you do is get the program flyer and maybe meet with the counselors for Pathways and have them identify and isolate all of the pre-voc training and how that ultimately leads to the goal of digital design and so forth and post-production film. And that's how you lay it out in terms of an analysis. But this is going to be a situation where a lot of the folks are going to be pointing at the other side saying it's not our responsibility. It's wise of you to have everybody at the table. Because when it comes time to make the decision, keep in mind that the IEP team is vested with making the FAPE call, which means they have to be able to tell you yes or no, we can do this as part of your FAPE offer. The regional center should have somebody there who has decision-making authority. You may want to ask in advance that they have someone who has that authority.
Okay.
Same with the Department of Rehab. And all of them have an advocacy duty, which is they all should be there helping to get your daughter on the path that you're trying to achieve. I've had a lot of kids go through those programs at Pathways. It's wonderful. It gives them a college experience. It gives them the chance to live away from home, and it gives them an inclusive opportunity to be alongside typical peers, that are age appropriate. A lot of times, a high school vocational program may be co-located with younger children on a school site, that kind of thing. And so there's a lot of value for that experiential opportunity that they provide. It's a very well-regarded program. So good luck with this. I'd love to hear more about how it went.
As a matter of fact, I literally put together a video of my little daughter. I did the whole script, and she's naming, I want to have the college experience, I want to cook, I want to ride the bus to recreational center, blah, blah. She names all the things, and she wants it. What she wants is, I want to post, I want to have a foundation at the post-production, so that I can go, so she does the whole script, and we have the pictures going, because at high school she's a cheerleader, she's a track star, she's a service worker in the library, so she names all these things, so she's showing her volunteerism and all of these things, and she says, my dream is to so it's really cute, and it's a little presentation, it's about 7 minutes. I don't know if I'll get to play it, but we got the little thumb drive, and I plan to have a little.
You need to play that.
Okay.
If you're going to prepare such a beautiful presentation,
Yes,
I think everybody should be treated to hearing it. And keep in mind all the components that you're hitting on there: families' preferences, consumers' desires, right? And results-oriented, outcome-oriented transition planning.
Could you just repeat those?
Sure, they're in the workshop,
Okay,
but we'll make sure to get you a copy.
Okay.
And those are all catchwords under the law, so you want to use all of those things.
Okay.
Especially the slide that has, if we can go back, there's that slide with the 5 pieces, the 5 components. Get to the back more. Some more, sir. More.
So this wouldn't necessarily be the time that DLR would
A little more, I think.
have a lot of participation.
Well, DOR should be participating because they're the ones who ultimately are going to be providing the supports for her to get into full-time employment. And the difficulty is that, with the school district staying involved through the age 22 transition, you're in that, there it is, these pieces. And this particular case would be very helpful for you to read. Because, again, the obligation under peer of last resort is really a strong obligation. But yet, because of the trailer bill, your service coordinator is going to be rather confused about why it is that you're asking the regional center to help at this level when it's 18 to 22. Because they're being specifically told by the legislature that that's a school district obligation, and it may be. But in the meantime, while you pursue that help, regional center should be stepping in and helping your family. Otherwise, you go with an unfunded mandate. Yeah.
So I'm the deer in the headlights here.
Okay.
Because we
Do our best.
moved from New York. All this stuff, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, boy.
And even though I have a pretty detailed transition plan, and he is accepted to the regional center, and they do have it, I never even got a plan, a PFP.
Okay.
Never got
How
any
old is your
course.
child?
He's 19.
19. And has he graduated high school yet?
Yes,
He graduated with a diploma.
yes,
Did they do the assessments?
yes. And he's got we have all these things, all these goals in this last IEP. But where do you go? I tried to call their advocacy line, and
For the regional center, you're asking him?
yeah, I don't even know where to start. I mean, the regional center advocacy line, they say, call our normal business hours are 9:30 to 5 Monday through Friday, but that's always on there.
What is,
At 2 o'clock and 9 o'clock, whatever, it's always on.
got it. Okay, what is, may I ask your child's disability?
Asperger's?
Okay. Do they have, does your child have a full DSM-5 autism spectrum diagnosis? Or is it atypical autism?
No, he's got the full.
Okay. And did the disability originate according to the documentation prior to the age of 18?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what I'm just giving you back is welfare and institutions code 4512, which is it has to be one of the 5 acknowledged categories and it has to originate before the age of 18. And then the final thing is that it has to affect 3 major life domains. So you have to make sure, a lot of times our kids who are high spectrum, they have the diagnosis, but they don't necessarily have the impact in their day-to-day. And so you want to make sure that those assessments,
It's in there.
it's all documented.
It's all documented.
What section of the city do you live in? Right here? So the intake is North Los Angeles Regional
We
Center.
went through the whole intake.
And have they made an appointment?
We had an appointment, but I never got anything after that. I've never gotten a letter, I've never got it.
How long ago was that?
6 months ago.
Okay, so I would,
So, and I tried to call the advocacy line.
so what I would do, if I were you, here's what I would do. Okay. Make yourself a lunch. Head down to North LA Regional Center. North LA in particular is locked down now. Ever since, unfortunately, the Inland Regional Center tragedy, North LA took that very seriously, and no one will answer the door on any department. So if you go and actually park yourself there, bring your lunch, and let them know I'll be staying here until such a time as I'm seen, and I need a supervisor on duty. And then you tell them, it's been 6 months. The other thing I would want you to tell them is that your child's at risk of significant regression because of the fact that they're delaying the intake. There's,
The intake's done.
well, yes, but you don't have a plan.
And I've never gotten anything, I never got a copy of it, I never got anything.
I believe the statute says that they have 60 days once the intake is complete to devise the IPP. What I would want you to do, there's an excellent resource that would be very helpful for you. It's organized around a layperson's question and answer. And I'm not saying you're a layperson, I don't know your background, but it's called Rights Under the Lanterman Act. It's put out by an organization called Disability Rights California. And it's called the RULA Manual, Rights Under the Lanterman Act. And it's organized in a question and answer format. In particular, you want to look at intake and the initial IPP.
And where do I get this?
It's on the web. Disability Rights California has. They also have a series of other manuals. They have one for special education rights. It's called the SIRS Manual, Special Education Rights and Responsibilities.
Disability of California.
Disability Rights California. And start there because it's going to give you a lot of catchphrase that you can use to great effect during your lunch.
Should I bring somebody with me, or is that something?
Whoever supports you to get through tough times. Yeah, I don't know who that person is, but I bring it. But the point is that you have the right to have an IPP in place, and so that's absolutely not within the realm. So 6 months is way too long. And
Well,
this is-
they tried to send some guy for life transition, whatever, and he was not acceptable. What they were offering was not acceptable. I said, that's not acceptable. They said, well, when is your son planning on moving out of the house? I said, he has no direct plans, but it's a future plan. They said, well, we won't supply service until it's 18 months before he's moving out of the house.
Okay, so here's what I would suggest.
But then I never got anything after that. That was the only thing.
Does he have no plan, or he doesn't have
I've
the
never-
requisite skills to be able to make a transition to 18 months from now?
He doesn't have a plan, and he doesn't have the skills.
So talk about the plan.
There's no plan. I mean, there's a plan in his IEP, the transition plan in the IEP. That's the only plan I have.
Go with that one for now. I think that one says he's wanting to live independently. Okay, start there.
I don't think everybody else.
No, I'm sure we all can relate, right? I'm sure. That's the beauty of these the parent courses. Everybody's swimming in the same pool. So, yeah.
It's after the graduations and then high school, and then the 4 and the 10, right? Because like my son's in graduation and the high schools, and then after that, then we just don't know where we go.
You don't know where to go next?
Yeah.
So after graduation, your special education rights end. Now, I want to give a little bit of a disclaimer on that. And you may want to consider this. If you had a particularly difficult time ahead of graduation where not a lot was accomplished, you actually have a 2-year statute of limitations on graduation, which means you can go backwards in time, 2 years prior to the graduation happening, and ask the school district to help if they missed what was necessary prior to that time. So even they go back 2 years from graduation. Was he, well, I need a few more facts. When did he graduate?
What are you going to do with the
2 years ago?
I'm going to upload
Okay, so it probably won't apply to you because,
upload it.
so you can't open up the IEP again. You can't say, take it back as a high school. But you can ask them to look and see. For instance, one of the things we talked about was exit assessments. If your school district didn't do comprehensive testing for your child, and so now you're stuck at a place where you don't have a plan forward because no one tested, you may be able to ask the school district to conduct those assessments now because they should have been done before.
But that was in another state.
Yeah,
And you'd have to check each state, but I'm pretty sure that the 2-year statute is pretty uniform.
but the problem is then like this years and this years.
Yeah. Is your child eligible for the regional center? Does your child have a diagnosis?
Yeah.
What is the diagnosis? Autism? Okay, so autism is one of the 5 categories. Autism spectrum is one of the 5 categories. Was the diagnosis delivered prior to the age of 18? The diagnosis of autism, did it happen before the age of 18?
Yes.
Okay, you have a document that talks about that?
Yes.
Okay,
They take go to the American, so they have all
are you also in this area? If you live also in this area?
Yeah, well, she and her son live here, but her, I think her residence is still on the
Okay, that might, we need to have this conversation offline, because there's a lot of details, but if your residence is here, you might want to go to her lunch.
We think about them, they're all on the sense.
Yeah, I think so. If you don't know what to do, go with her, and the person who knows what to do will be there, and they can give you the necessary documents. You're gonna make it. You're gonna make it. You just have to get organized and get in there. Other questions?
You're saying about once they graduate high school, they're no longer under the.
Yeah, so a certificate of completion is different. What I'm talking about is a receipt of a general education high school diploma.
Okay.
Otherwise, they age out at age 22, and the statute decides when exactly based on their birthday.
Okay.
So it depends when they were born. But it's a quick answer once the birthday is known. And, Sam?
Thinking ahead to our transition planning, it looks like we're right on a good timeline, but thinking about acquiring high school credits and what right now is still on a diploma track to get the necessary credits. And there's a couple later questions. One, are the credits that they would need to provide in order to graduate them limited to just basic graduation credits by the district's requirements, or does that include any sort of A through G additional kinds of
Okay, so
courses?
the reference to A through G is A through G qualifying classes make it possible for your child at graduation to go to a California State University. If the child graduates but without A through G classes, or if you have modifications and so forth in those classes, you would graduate conceivably, but not with A through G qualification to be able to go on to college right then and there. And often those students would then need to go into community college and possibly acquire units for transfer. In addition, there are requirements for the number of units that the student must have on their transcripts and the types of classes. For instance, there are mandatory physical education requirements, there are mandatory foreign language studies, math. Government is the big one. Usually in the senior year, there's a government class required. If the student doesn't take it, they often can't graduate time. So I would say that as you get closer, you want to make an appointment with the high school guidance counselor just to help you understand what the requirements are for successful high school graduation, and then keep track along the way. Most parents usually start to look at that as you get, in the second part of the sophomore, early junior year.
So then this add-on question there is, could those additional 18 to 22 years, if this wasn't completed in 4 years, which I can't imagine, could those things be spread out or into that additional time? But how would that work? Would that have to stay with, now that's an older student, would they be on the regular campus, or would they need to fill those credits like at community college or at some other mystery location?
So that raises a really interesting question on a lot of levels, both philosophically and practical availability of these programs. A lot of students are told early on that they have to pick between a vocational track and a graduation track. And that is, the student is, and I've seen it as young as 5 years old, where the school district is telling the parents, you have to pick if your child's going to graduate high school or if your child is going to be equipped with life skills. And what I usual standing advice in our office is both. You should plan a graduation and working towards that, and you need to acquire the necessary life skills. School districts aren't comfortable with that always, but if they refuse to entertain your belief on that, and they want to hold off and make a determination. Now, I believe that there's no reason that they couldn't continue to pursue their high school diploma all the way up to age 22. The problem is usually after age 18, school districts have sort of an adult transition program, and almost all of those activities are geared around vocational skills. And so if your goal is optimizing academics and getting them ready to be academically prepared, let's say for college, and they just need more time, then conceivably you'll be thwarted in that effort. And that's why your question is so apropos. Sometimes a place like Pathways, which is going to work on vocational skills, but also an opportunity for academics, may be the answer for you. And it might be a situation that the school's predetermined program of this is how we transition our students doesn't fit into the vision of the child and the vision of the parents in terms of the longer term goal. So it requires that you have to be deft and continue to focus on the outcome and make sure your transition plan calls for the kind of interventions you're looking for. And again, I can see how some parents might say, Mark, you've given some good advice and so forth, but we're already out of high school, so how does this all apply to us? I would suggest to you that the very concepts that we're discussing applicable to 16 years old and above apply now, which is you can always stand up, dust off your knees, and figure out how to make that program outcome oriented. And that's what I meant by the goal matrix and trying to deliver a program that's objectively measurable towards a longer term goal and get all of those parties at the table. Where is the Department of Rehab? Why aren't they there? If your child is still school age eligible, why is the school district taking such a hands-off approach?
It's I have a question. This is over 22 years old, so not working in the school district anymore, but trying to get the services that we need through the regional center. They keep on talking about the Department of Rehab, and we did work with them, but nothing came out of it.
Okay.
So I don't know.
That's where you've got your nice payer of last resort analysis coming into play, which is if rehab was trying to fulfill a role but couldn't or didn't, you've explored and exhausted. At that point, the regional center should be stepping forward.
So even if it was kind of his fault, like he didn't show up for some reason,
Fault is a funny thing.
I didn't have the skill set to do
Right.
it.
I mean, it's almost like it's like the young man who utilizes a wheelchair for ambulation. Why isn't he running? It's like maybe it's using components of his disability against him. And so, if it's truly not following through, they'll be quick to point that out to you. We set this up and this up and this up and so forth. And that's when maybe self-advocacy, or that's when, organization of a multi-step sequence is something difficult for him, showing up for appointments. And would it be helpful if the MVP already isolated each of those concerns when they give you that line, which is, he hasn't done these things, but guess what, it's in the IPP, which is why you need to make sure your document is written completely, okay, to capture the range of needs that he has. But again, I would say, even if you hit a couple of rocky patches and you're sort of stuck, you could probably stop, reorganize, and get back on path. And it probably will involve you asking for a series of meetings and holding them to account. That's the other thing.
So I did do that, I had a series of meetings and still no response.
Do you give them
I'm
deadlines?
working on it, yeah, no, and then I did send them a registered letter.
Right.
And wanted a written response, no response.
So one of the problems that we get into frequently with our regional center matters is regional centers have an obligation to respond to your requests, and they also have an obligation to respond usually in a certified mailing through a concept called a notice of proposed action. In California, the notice of proposed action is helpful because it tells you all of the reasons that the regional center is not doing what it said it would do. And often what happens is the regional center service coordinator will just call you and say, so we've looked into it, we can't do that, but then there's no NOPA. And if without a notice of proposed action, the parent is in queue to know that they have to file fair hearing
And
request.
I'm asking them for a denial. Like, denial.
Right.
They won't
They
deny it.
should deny you,
It's
right.
It's ambiguous, they've been there 3 years.
Right.
Limbo, and now they're saying I need a new IPP. And I'm like,
You wake up and it's 10 years later,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't know if it's a combination of just being too busy or overwhelmed, or maybe it's sometimes in the interest of the agency to do little.
Yeah, no, I think this is purposeful.
Let me just say this, I do this job every day, and so every day I wake up and I sort of shake my head and say, everybody is going to be good today. Because I believe in people, I really do. But yeah, it's possible that they might be just delaying you, just to save some money.
What, like,
Yeah, that's why, I like to write letters that say, you have to reply by this date. And if you are denying the service, I would request that it be done through the formal method of a notice of proposed action pursuant to WIC code blank.
I guess I'll use that terminology, notice of proposed action.
Yeah, the notice of proposed action gives you the rights under the act.
Autism Society a number of years ago. And,
Sure.
the person who wrote the state's book about transition, I can't remember, her name was Blackman or something like that. She was the speaker, and at one point she said, if you don't think your child's ready for graduation, just like back off, do not take the diploma. Well, I tried to sabotage both of my kids. I have twins, they're both autistic. I tried to sabotage their diploma, getting their diploma, and I lost. The school district just wanted them out. One of them was high functioning, and she was on an academic track, and she was, essentially set up to graduate with a 3.98, but she had no transition. And so, stupid me, I allowed her to take all the required academic classes with the idea that after she finished that, then I was going to have her go to Santa Monica College, learn how to take the bus, and spend part of her time at Santa Monica College, part of her time at high school, and do this transition. Well, because she had taken all the required new classes, they went, she's out. So then my son, who was nonverbal, who basically did not deserve to get a diploma, he needed to spend more time in his classroom, which was a phenomenal classroom with a phenomenal teacher, who we then created a program that he's now in, she's the director of. But he needed to spend another year with her. They said, out, 18, out, give him the diploma. And I kept saying, no. And I tried to pull him out of the last class that he was taking, that he needed government to get his diploma. They wouldn't let you do it.
So it's tricky, because on one
So
hand,
don't let your kids take all the required classes.
Yeah, our saved our
Don't let the
children.
kids take all the required classes.
it's tough because, I don't know if it's occurred to you folks this or not, but a lot of our role as parent of an exceptional child is often contrary to everything we thought we were supposed to be doing. You're supposed to take the teacher's word for it because the teachers are here to help. And
once again, thank you for being here. I don't know that I talked about this enough, but when we were building this program, we weren't considering what to do with, parents' needs or questions or even housing. We had a really hard time just building a program. That we have our hands full in it, and it's really helpful to have the parent organization and the parent facilitators to make this happen. You guys are what this is all about. So if you guys can help each other, like Mark said, it's so valuable for you guys to be here for each other and help you guys through this. I don't have a child with special needs. I don't know I really sympathize with all of the things that you guys go through. It's hard. but you guys have the knowledge to help each other out with this. Secondly, and again, thank you guys for pulling this off, and thank you for being here. You really I learn a little bit more each time, and again, I'm by far not an expert in this. We're, by default and a lot of hard work, I've become an expert in building the school and putting this together, but I don't know about all those other intricacies. I want to just make a note one more time of our program and how expensive it is to run it. I know that it's not cheap for everyone else to get into it either, and that's why we're here discussing regional center and so on and so forth. But I do want you to understand that even besides the money that parents pay for the program, we have to raise $600,000, to make this thing happen. We actually, for every full-time student, we're coming up with another $8,000 to $10,000 besides what the families pay in order to make this happen. And so we do a whole lot of fundraising. And so I made a plea this year that especially for the full-time parents, that everyone help to contribute by talking to friends, families, work, matching funds, that everyone try and come up with $1,000 a family. Again, we're raising at least $8,000 per family to make it happen. And so we need your help because we're out there every day. It was I was just talking to Tina, and I was talking about the fact that I'm not around to be in the school anymore. I'm not around to know what's going on with the intricacies of every child. Hold on one second, because I'm out there having to raise money. I'm out there talking to the studios to make sure that they have jobs at the end of the day. By the way, the reason we only take 10 students a year, it's really simple. We don't have 10 jobs at the end of the day to employ them in. So I'm spending a whole lot of time at the studios trying to make sure that those jobs are going to be there by the time your kids get through the program and graduate. So I'm just making one more plea out there that whatever you can do, we have donation envelopes, send them to friends, family, anyone that you think that can help us out. In order to keep this program around, for those of you that are just getting into the program, we need help to make this happen. You have a question? Cheryl? Hi.
You said you don't have a child on the spectrum. I just wondered what made you leave your school?
Wow. I don't get asked that question very often. I'm going to be honest with you guys. It was a shock. Basically 5 years ago, these ladies showed up in my studio and had this great idea of starting a school for young adults with autism to learn visual effects and animation. I had a visual effects and animation studio. I was servicing Universal Studios and Disneyland mostly, but I was doing production companies as well. And I thought, wow, what an interesting program you have going. And we talked for about 2 hours, and they kept telling me they were renting space. They wanted to rent space. And I finally said, I don't know why you'd want to rent in this dusty old warehouse, and there's no bus line near here. I don't know why you're thinking about this. And they said, we're not really here to rent space. We're here to check you out to be our new director. Well, the program hadn't been created yet. So program director, and I thought, well, I'll give you 10 hours a week. I had no idea what I was doing. I'll give you 10 hours a week, and that turned into 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 and 60 hours a week. Now I do at least 80. So I ended up closing down my studio. And when you ask why did I do this, at the risk of being just a little bit spiritual, I'm very spiritual and not all that religious, because I love learning about every religion. Those of you that get into religious discussions with me, I love religion. But mostly because I love to learn how other people worship and learn about God and so on and so forth. But here's where I get to a personal place. I went home and I prayed about it. And I said, God, is this what I'm supposed to do with my life? And I heard someone laughing at me. And that voice said, no, I need you to do this. This has nothing to do with you. And so to me, that's really why I'm here. I think this is a calling. This isn't a job. I took a huge pay cut to even take this job. The right people have shown up at the right times, the right staff members, the right parents have shown up at the right time to do this. So I feel like I'm not in charge. I feel like the things are coming together for the right reasons. And so that's really why I'm here. And every day I see something amazing, or I'll tell you what, you know what, even the right naysayers show up at the right time, right? The right people that are angry at me for something, or what, it happens all the time. I know, listen, we're trying hard, but it happens all the time. And I just have to stop and say, I must not be explaining this right. Because I know we're doing it for the right reasons. So I must not be explaining it right. We need to figure this out. And those folks have helped me to learn a lot. And so that's why I'm here. I'm here because when I'm having a bad day, all I have to do is go into a classroom, hang out with one of your sons and daughters, and I'm lifted up again. And I think it's the most amazing thing in the world. I think this is a great program. So that's why I'm here. Okay, as I said to some of you, I've moved into an executive director position, which means I'm raising more money and talking to more studios. So I don't know what's going on day to day with your students. Benjamin Maxner is the guy to talk to. He is amazing, guys. I can't tell you how great that guy is and what he's doing for our program. The staff, all of the teachers. I mean, we don't have people that we need to fix that problem. I mean, we have the best staff on earth. These guys are all not doing it for the money. They're doing it because they love your sons and daughters. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, because we may not be aware of something or this, that, and the other, and we'd like to help. Okay? Thank you.
Our next parent meeting is December 11th. We have David Turk coming, and he's a financial planner, so he's going to talk to us about some special needs planning. It'll be very interesting. And Kathy, there was a door prize?
Yes, for number 39.
Number 39? Who's number 39?
39.
You win if you're number 39.
Come on, I can't remember. I guess I went right before. Go.
Yes?
No?
Uh-oh, quick.
The other thing too about our parent group is the parent group basically started maybe 5 years ago, and it's kind of this work in progress, and parents come in, parents leave, parents come in with their great ideas, and that's the way that we evolve. And so we're in a different part of an evolution process, but all your great ideas are awesome and valid, so please email us if you have great ideas, or come and talk to us. We're exceptional parents at exceptionalmindstudio.org.
And they are exceptional. You guys rock.
Okay, well, I'm choked up over Ernie's talk. I don't know about you guys, but it really touched me. And just to come back around to the people that volunteered for a snack next time, Naomi and Deborah, remember, I'll call and remind you guys, but I don't know if you want to get together before you leave and decide what each of you want to bring, but you can just bring it and then we'll set it out on the table and that's it. And you don't have to go crazy because none of us seem to eat that much. We're more interested in what's going on more than coming here to eat, but it's fun to have a little bit of nibble food, right? And thanks for everybody volunteering for helping, and we're going to be taking volunteers for the room parent. So if you want to email me at Exceptional Parents, we'll figure out who really wants to do it the most and pick somebody for that. And then we can go over some of the parameters for that job. And does anybody have, and back to the door prize, does anybody have number 38? I have a list of numbers to choose from. Cool.
Thank you so much.
Real quick, these envelopes are on the table, so if you want to take them with you, a little handful for your friends and neighbors and coworkers or anybody else that you want to tell about the program, you can say, here, I just happen to have this in my purse. It's a little, rough on the edges, but, I've been carrying it around just so in case I run into somebody that really wants to help us out, here it is. So, okay?
You just drop it in the mail. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming.